While I was still at school, I was fascinated by sound and studios and all that jazz, so I was building, valve radios back then when I was 10 years old. So yeah, I was always interested in that stuff, and I worked at a studio back in the day when it was all valves, basically. I didn't do very well at school at all, and so my parents managed to sign me up to the ABC to get a technician in training course. So that was great, and so going to work at a TV and radio station, and notionally the best in the land, was pretty good. So that was a 5-year course, and I think at the end of year 3 or year 4 they decided everybody needed to be upskilled, so they sent us off to the RMIT, and we did a diploma course there. And that was 2 years full time, and so having finished, a friend of mine said, "Oh, do you want to come and roadie in a band?" Well, I knew a guy called Peter Blackmore, who's just about as old as I am. We used to repair gear. He used to have a production company, and we used to repair a bit of gear for him. And he rang me one day and he said, "I've got this job to do, and some audio-visual installation at Coles Myers' new headquarters." And Coles Myers, a big outfit in Australia. And so he got a brief from the client, and he gave me a brief of this is the sort of thing we want to do. And we sort of sat down and drew some block diagrams up, and I fleshed them out a bit. And off we went. And so we did that job. And then I think pretty much after that was finished, he won the consultancy to do the new Shell headquarters in Melbourne. So we sort of did it again, and read some books and stuff, and it just sort of went from there. So he sort of got one job after another. So he consulted, and we built it, and it was good. We set up Soundcorp really to sell just equipment at arm's length, because I loved the building side of things, and looking at a system that it was finished. It was nice to sit back and go, wow, look at that. Whereas straight sales never interested me so much. So it was a bit like, look, you guys go off and do that, and I'll continue building systems. I suppose early on in the piece, I guess my dad said to me, if you don't delegate, you'll be an artisan, which meant you were always going to be a one-man show. And I remember early on in the piece, I delegated a bit of stuff to people which they screwed up, and you just basically had to go, well, and go listen to that thing again of saying, well, you've got to delegate, so you've got to put up with the things that people screw up, and hopefully they don't, make the same mistake again. Well, Sandy was the HR manager for many years, and certainly hired a lot of our long-time people there. And she worked with me for pretty much the whole time the business was going. I think she maybe came in and started working in the business 2 or 3 years after we started. She was the first CAD person we had on, and she used to do CAD for us for a couple of years, and HR, and eventually we grew. We got somebody in to look after the CAD all the time, and she just focused on HR, and she was instrumental in hiring a whole lot of people, and we would talk about who we might hire, but she was on the front line in terms of deciding who we would and who we wouldn't employ. Certainly in the old days, before we really had the internet, you certainly had to be self-reliant, and I was very aware of that, because when things would go wrong, you couldn't pick up the phone and talk to somebody in the States because it's night time there, and so you had to have good skills to be able to deal with things yourself. So I think the fact that Australia is where it is, it forces everybody to be self-sufficient. Not so much today because of the communication we've got, which is so easy, and the internet and knowledge bases and all that jazz, but we didn't have any of that stuff in those days. I guess just being able to get to the other end and building a company with a hell of a lot of fantastic people, and there's probably not one single achievement. I remember when we built the casino in '96, I was actually down there myself working with guys to get the thing over the line. But there's been a lot of fantastic projects. We've done that, and the convention centre here, the MCG, 15 years the sale process went on for a year or more, and you've got to eventually, I think, say to yourself, well, you know, it is time to move on, and if you don't sort of get yourself into that frame of mind, it'll be difficult. So if you're going to be fair dinkum about selling, you know, the end point was that it's going to be somebody else's, and you're going to have to let go. So either you try and get yourself into that frame of mind and coming to grips with letting go or not. So I suppose I've been saying to myself subconsciously for a year or more now, well, you know the end process is going to be it's not your company anymore, so you get used to it. So I've had a while to get used to that thought. When the sort of sale process was going on, I had a few sleepless nights deciding, wondering what the hell I was going to do with myself, but and I'm still not sure, but I do have a couple of little farms that I'm playing with, and so I'm spending more time doing that, and that's nice to be able to get out, you know, in the sort of thing we're doing. You're not outside an awful lot, so it's nice to be out in the country air and the sun and the fresh air. I think after a while you get a bit stale doing. It was, I think, part of the reason for getting in a CEO that, much as I didn't like to admit I was getting stale, the fact is that I was, and so you've really got to hand it over to somebody else. And I've probably got a bit stale on this whole, you know, on the whole organisation. I mean, you know, too much of anything, of a good thing, isn't a good thing for somebody, and I feel a bit like I've had too much of a good thing. So I've really got to go out and put myself back in the fire again to decide, you know, and reinvent myself a bit.